Imagine a world where fertility rates are plummeting, conditions like Parkinson's are skyrocketing, and the frogs are changing from male to female? Sounds like a sci-fi dystopia, right? Well, what if I told you this is our reality because of pesticides? We're going to break it all down and talk about the hormone disrupting effects of things like glyphosate and atrazine. And stick around, too, for that landmark golf course study, because we're breaking it down. Pesticides are a massive category of chemicals, with atrazine and glyphosate leading the pack globally. They include things like insecticides, herbicides, vermicides, fungicides, rodicides, and herbicides are the most common used class of pesticides here in the US. Exposure to pesticides can occur through inhalation, direct skin contact, ingestion, food residue, contaminated drinking water, especially individuals that are at most risk include pregnant and nursing women, infants and children, and then obviously the workers who directly handle the pesticides. To start, the slow, silent accumulation of pesticides in the body have been linked to chronic illness, from cancer to hormone disruption, and a few health prognosis. Pesticide effects can be categorized into 3 different categories. Acute is obviously if you get exposed right now within minutes to 24 hours. Subacute usually happens a day to a couple weeks, and chronic extends weeks to years. And this is where I really want to focus in this podcast. Chronic exposure can lead to bioaccumulation, where toxicants build up to a harmful level in the organism that interfere with our bodily functions. And toxicants are different than toxins because toxins are something our body produces. Dysfunction leads to chronic exposure. Dysfunction related to chronic exposure may increase our risk for things like cancer, autoimmune dysfunction, hormone disruption affecting both male and female, things like sperm morphology, mobility, and amount, and leading to anovulation in females. Metabolic illnesses like obesity and type 2 diabetes mellitus, and neurological changes, things like Parkinson's disease and dementia. And let's not forget the important developmental issues that fetuses and babies may have as well. So how do we even assess the risk for chronic and low-grade exposure? Well, it's super challenging because there's inconsistent lab tests and physical exam findings. Chronic exposure symptoms can be super vague, like fatigue and headaches and gut dysbiosis. Acute exposures are very well understood, but we don't understand as much about indirect exposures from things like food residues, contaminated water, and environmental accumulation. Now, I'm about to get a little technical, and it's really important that we understand what the heck these things are, because organophosphates are actually nerve gas, and glyphosate and organophosphates are reshaping our health, and not for the better. Organophosphates are a class of insecticides, and these things might be, like your roach sprays that you have in your home. This class of chemicals includes things like nerve gas, like sarin, if we remember from the Syria issue a few years ago. And these things affect our acetylcholine esterase enzymes, which is really important for nerve conduction. So some acute symptoms, which again, not the focus here, but like you're going to be really altered. You're going to have pinpoint pupils, drooling, vomiting, difficulty breathing, and actually that's the most common cause of death with organophosphate exposure. Now, more chronic symptoms include things like flu symptoms, memory loss, impaired judgment, and increased risk of things like Parkinson's disease. And some organophosphates are considered possible carcinogens, all the legal term of like possible or maybe, we don't know or doesn't, and just like it's somewhat ridiculous. Now, some food exposures you might get are things like from wheat and cooking oil, things like canola oil, and then as I mentioned, household products like ant and roach sprays. Now, glyphosate. Glyphosate is primarily used as an herbicide on genetically engineered corn and soy, but it's used ubiquitously. Like you go to Home Depot and it's everywhere. And it's also used as a desiccant on crops like wheat, oats, and beans to aid in harvesting, which is a major source of food residues. Now, the mechanism of action has nothing to do with human physiology, or does it? In plants, it inhibits an enzyme in the shikimate pathway, which is important for amino acid production, but in humans, while we don't have that, it does act as a broad spectrum antibiotic because our gut flora does have the shikimate pathway, which they are important for intestinal health, vitamin synthesis, and immune function. So don't forget to check out my previous episode, Why is Modern Farming Killing Us, with regenerative farmer Bob Baxley, because we talk a lot about glyphosate in there. So for example, chronic illnesses that have been associated with glyphosate exposure: increased intestinal permeability, associated with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, inflammatory bowels, and they have been shown to be cytotoxic, toxic to our cells, and neurotoxic, toxic to our nervous system. There is a little bit of historical context here. In 2018, a groundskeeper, Dwayne Johnson, won a landmark study of $289 million settlement against Monsanto's, now Bayer Pharmaceuticals, for his non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. This case was a significant event in product liability history because it's the first of its kind. And in May of 2025, over 100,000 cases are planned to be paid out, a total of $11 billion by Monsanto. But they've maintained, hey, we've got 800 clinical or scientific studies saying, hey, glyphosate is super safe and does not cause cancer. My question is how much data does the EPA need in order to just determine if something is unsafe? Like, come on. Like, this is getting a little ridiculous in my mind. One last chemical category we're going to talk about: atrazine. This is primarily an herbicide sprayed on crops like maize or corn, sorghum, and sugarcane, and it acts to control broad-leafed weeds, things like dandelion, right? Mechanism of action: inhibits photosynthesis, right? We don't have the ability to photosynthesize as humans, but it does impact our hypothalamic pituitary gonadal axis, our HPG axis, leading to neuroendocrine issues such as fertility and neurological concerns. It does show in animal studies to feminize male frogs, even in small amounts, upregulating aromatase enzyme, which converts testosterone into estrogen. And up to 10% of those frogs that I mentioned can actually reproduce as female. In rodents, the exposure is related to menstrual regulators, pregnancy loss, delayed puberty, reduced in testosterone. And the EPA and the International Association of Cancer Research has classified atrazine as not likely to be carcinogenic to humans. Upcoming studies are expected to show higher risks of lung cancer, prostate, throat, and kidney cancers in workers that use these directly. The EPA identifies children under the age of 2 and workers who mix, load, and apply atrazine as the most at risk. And a quick note on 2,4-D, because this is the one that my family members use the most. It mimics plant hormone auxin, which causes rapid unstable growth, leading to their to their ultimate demise. And similar issues to glyphosate in the development of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Now, I do want to talk about current legislative and public issues that are going on right now today. Pesticide industry, through trade organizations like CropLife America, are lobbying for liability shields to protect manufacturers from the lawsuits. North Dakota and Georgia have already passed laws just this past legislative season in 2025 to prevent manufacturers from being held liable to failure to warn claims of their product that is EPA approved. Similar provisions were heavily contested and ultimately removed from the 2024 Farm Bill that I talked about with my episode with Jake Gray, the chicken guy. And large corporations, including non-American companies like Syngestra and Bayer, are working with American companies like Corteva and FMC through CropLife to influence lobbying efforts and creating political action committees, PACs, that are used to incentivize politicians and committee members to vote in favor of these lobbying efforts. Let's not forget that there are party lines here. Democrats tend to vote in favor of pharmaceuticals and Republicans tend to vote in favor of big ag. Let's not forget that they are oftentimes the same company. Bayer bought Monsanto. Let's consider a couple of movies that have come out, Aaron Brockovich and Dark Waters, that talk about the nasty tactics of discrediting scientists and making people look foolish. When they present data. These are good scientists that lose their funding and lose their positions at academic research centers, whether they're universities or not. And I forget the gal's name, but she's written a couple of books now specifically on glyphosate, and she has lost her entire academic career because she is maintaining her integrity as a scientist. So while the science is supposedly settled that glyphosate is safe, I am not convinced of this, and we really need to consider these corporations are not out for our best interest. They're out for their making profits. Let's talk about Parkinson's and the golf course study. Turns out the closer you live to a golf course, the higher your risk of Parkinson's disease. Could be the pesticides. I suspect it's the pesticides. A population-based case control study is an observational study that compares the exposure histories of individuals with specific diseases, or in this case, cases, and those that don't have the disease, controls. Both cases and controls are selected from well-defined source population. So that's kind of the study that that just came out in May. The study is a population-based case control where we look at comparing people with the disease and those without. Okay, and this is level 4 out of 8 in terms of evidence, but it does hold significant weight due to the large control group. The study included 419 people with Parkinson's disease who lived 1 to 3 miles from a golf course, and just over 5,000 control subjects who lived in a similar area but not exactly that close to a golf course. The key findings were that the closer you live to a golf course, the higher your odds are of developing Parkinson's disease. And for every mile a person lived past 3 miles from a golf course, their odds of developing Parkinson's disease decreased by 13%. That's pretty wild. People who lived within a mile of a golf course had 126% increased risk of developing Parkinson's. And that was the like big fact that was going around on social media, freaking people out. Individuals who drank water from the nearby that worked on the same that shared a golf course had a 49% increased odds of developing Parkinson's as well, compared to those on private well water or water that did not use golf courses. The pesticides that were mentioned in this study included several that are associated with Parkinson's disease-like symptoms, including paraquat, which is heavily restricted in the US, and you have to be a licensed applicator, and it's banned in over 70 countries, including the European Union. Rotenone is largely banned in the US, but it's mostly still used as a pesticide, used to kill fish, actually. So they're pouring it directly into our waterways. Don't worry about that. Other pesticides like organophosphates and MCPP and 2,4-D are also mentioned. The authors did not mention glyphosate, though it is used extensively on golf courses. So now that I've scared the pants off you and saying, hey, you're going to lose your fertility and you're going to get cancer, how the heck do we actually reduce our exposure to pesticides? And this is a little bit different than like you going straight organic and moving away from your golf course too. One of the things that you can really do is being conscious about your food choices and cleaning your produce, and then safe applications if you do have to use pesticides. Okay, so the Dirty Dozen is by the Environmental Working Group, and I know there's some issues with them. They've taken funding in the past from organic groups, and they're not super transparent about their funding, but you know, nothing is perfect, and this tends to work fairly well in my practice. So following the Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen, and they come out every year sometime in the spring. So when you can prioritize organic, it's better for produce with soft skins like berries, greens, and tomatoes. I also add in things like wheat. I do not buy wheat unless it's organic. If it has thick peels, items with thick, easily removable peels, such as pineapples, avocados, bananas, and winter squash, they tend not to have the same level of pesticide residue. But if you can't afford to buy organic, don't skip fruits and veggies. Like, it's super important that you have fruits and vegetables. The benefits that you get from the fiber and the antioxidants are much better than you not eating them. Okay, but what you can do instead is using clean produce with either just cold running water, because most pesticides are actually water soluble. Don't forget to use a veggie brush on root veggies. And then you can soak things like berries and greens in a baking soda mix, a teaspoon per 2 cups of water for 10 to 15 minutes, and then rinse off. Peel if you can to remove, although the peel is often the most nutrient dense. And then there's the cocktail effect. So remember I said bioaccumulation is difficult to measure, blah, blah, blah. A Swedish study actually showed a family that switched from conventional to organic produce led in a significant drop in urinary pesticides, especially in children, which are at higher risk usually. So there are not very many studies looking at the cumulative or cocktail effect of multiple pesticide exposure. And then, you know, these safe application, like this is wearing your personal protective equipment, wear a mask. And I would say always wear a mask. I don't care how careful you are. Gloves, goggles, pants, long sleeve shirt, closed-toed shoes when you're applying pesticides. And then keep access restricted. So put up a little applicator that says, hey, be careful with your kids and pets. Follow manufacturer's instructions for mixing and use instructions precisely in well-ventilated areas to prevent accidental inhalation. Crop dusting does happen. If you live in an area that gets crop dusting, keep your windows and doors closed with air filter running during those times. Sometimes local beekeeping societies have a schedule for when crop dusting happens because bees are super susceptible. And my favorite thing for you guys to do is sweat it out, saunas. Now, we're not going to talk about cold plunges. We'll save that for another time. But saunas and using key herbs and nutrients are going to really help. The most important thing with environmental medicine is stop your exposure if you can. So if you know you're spraying glyphosate or your husband's spraying glyphosate, stop it. Find a different way. Some methods of detoxification include dry sauna and taking supplements like antioxidants supporting in liver and kidney function. I'm a big proponent of a basic cleansing diet, high fiber, lots of brassicas, things like collard greens, broccoli, cabbage, etc. No ultra processed food, reduce your dairy, no alcohol, and reduce sugar to bare minimum. Fiber is going to help bind and poop things out. Make sure you're drinking enough water, 2 to 3 liters a day, depending on body size. And then liver herbs, things like milk thistle, artichoke, dandelion root, schisandra, turmeric, ginger. Kidney herbs, astragalus, pillatory of the wall, milk thistle, nettle seed, dandelion root, and marshmallow root are super helpful here. I'm going to run through a quick list of vitamins and antioxidants that are going to be protective. Things like vitamins B, C, E, A, and carotenoids, CoQ10, flavonoids, polyphenols, glutathione, NAC, zinc, selenium, manganese, thiols. Those come from your brassicas. These all support phase 1 and 2 detoxification in the liver. Now, as far as sauna use goes, I'd recommend 10 to 15 minutes immediately bathing thereafter to remove the toxicants that have come out of your sweat. This has been an area that people get all huffy, like, no, you just sweat, and that's it. There's data that shows you sweat heavy metals, pesticides, and even plasticizers out. So for those of you that live close to a golf course, or you work in a related industry, or maybe you work with pesticides closely, this is a great way to help increase your urinary metabolites as well as get them out in your sweat. In addition, sauna also does increase blood flow to both your liver and kidneys, reduces oxidative stress and inflammation, all things that are negatively impacted by pesticide exposure. A test that you can do is by Vibrant America Toxic Effects Core Panel, and they look at your urine, do your first morning urine. Some people like to provoke with glutathione the day before. To summarize, it's not about going full organic. It's about informed consent, informed choices. Wheat products need to be organic to reduce glyphosate exposure. Same with oats, in my opinion. And if we do not, for my family, we choose not to use pesticides. We don't use them in or around our home. And in another podcast, I'll talk about why local food as a means of building community and reducing exposure and increasing nutrient density is super important. If you found this episode useful or controversial, share it with a friend. How I know that this channel is being helpful is if you like and subscribe to my channel. I am now on Spotify and Apple Podcasts as well. My next guest is going to be someone that's worked in this industry. She's an ND colleague of mine, and she has a lot of experience detoxing people who drink a lot of wine. Thank you so much for your time.